Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this session of the Arizona Regional OER Conference. It is my pleasure to introduce Jessica and Josie. Please remember that this session is being recorded. And Jessica, Josie, please take it away.
Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for being here today for applying an agile mindset to OER. My name is Josie Milliken, and I'm writing faculty at Pima Community College. I'm a Pima Online Department Head, an Associate Instructional Designer, Faculty Senate President, a yoga meditation instructor, and my focus is on open pedagogy, social justice, equity, inclusion, and of course, as you probably recognize, Agile and OER.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Jessica Zeitler. I am an instructional designer in the Center for Learning Technology at Pima Community College. I am a Spanish faculty, a long distance runner, and some of my professional interests include Agile, equity, student success, UDL, UX design, and of course, OER.
So here's how we have our session mapped out today. We would like to combined and collaboratively and separately create a definition for Agile, talk about the overlap of OER and Agile, and then go through a few ways of applying an Agile mindset to OER. And this is an active session, so you'll have the opportunity to actually brainstorm and map out ideas and do different things. So we hope that you fully participate and are engaged as we continue. To start off, we'd like to do an entrance poll. And so please open up Menti, MENTI.com. And if in a moment here, I will go ahead and share the voting instructions. And so you can go ahead and click on this or screenshot this QR code to automatically go to our poll, or you can enter 8234261. Okay, it looks like people are already in the Menti, and I'm showing my screen still, so if you still have not added the code, it's 8234268. All right. So we have about 9 people. We have a pretty, 10 people. We have a pretty good spread here. No one feels confident enough to select pretty familiar. We have extremely familiar, fantastic, not very familiar, also fantastic, familiar with the basics, and now we have someone pretty familiar, and completely unfamiliar, we have 4. So we have a really good grouping of people here, a good variation to go ahead and move along with our session. We have another question for you, and this one is, what would you most like to gain from this session today? So just go ahead and type into the blank, and when you're ready, submit, and we'll see all of your responses. Learn about something quite new to me. Excellent. Motivation. Motivation from the student perspective, I'm guessing, or understand more about Agile and education. Perfect. Learning more about Agile while focusing on how it can be used for OER. Oh, that's exactly what we're planning to do today. So an understanding of how Agile can help to develop OER materials, understand what Agile is, learn new ideas, general and expanded knowledge, a way to build OER in an effective and efficient manner. Yes, that's an ongoing goal for, I know, both Jess and I too. All right, I think the responses are kind of pausing. So Jess, did you have anything to add to what we see here?
Well, I'm excited that everybody's participating, and I love seeing just kind of some of the interest, because that really helps us kind of see how we can provide that information. So thank you so much for participating.
All right. So from here, we have a Jamboard. And so we'll put this link into the chat. And what you'll see, I'm going to go ahead and add it to the chat. And so please go in the link. And then what you'll see is, some of you are probably familiar with Jamboard and some of you may not be, but it's very simple to use. And I see people, okay, good. I see people popping in. And what you'll see on the first frame is what is called a Kanban board. And a Kanban board is a tool used for Agile project management. And the far left column is the to-do. The middle column is in progress, and the final column is done. And so you might see this in like a face-to-face setting. The Agile team might have it on their wall and their actual sticky notes. But we found that these Jamboard stickies work pretty good too. It's just not as tactile. And so our first goal here is to define Agile. So I'm going to move it into the in progress column. And then you'll see you can click up at the very top, left or right. And so we're going to click to the right and you'll see a task here. And it's use images, words, and memes or anything else to illustrate what you envision as the meaning of Agile. And so on this menu bar on the left, you can see there's a pen tool. You can choose different widths and colors. There's an eraser, a sticky note. I love the sticky notes. They're my favorite. And adding images, adding circles, and text. So all you have to do is, like, if you want to add text, click on the tool and then open up that box on the Jamboard and then type whatever your ideas are. So feel free to search around on Bing or Google or any other place, and we'll see what you come up with. Obviously, no right or wrong, as we all know. Just enjoy the process. So it can be anything that comes to mind when you think of Agile, your understanding of it. So it's just a brainstorm. No one's getting graded. The link does not work. Uh-oh. That's not good. I see a lot of people in there. Let me check the sharing setting.
Actually, if you will cut and paste the browser, cut and paste the text from the chat into the browser, it will work. I had some difficulty as well.
So you have to copy paste it rather than click directly on it. Thank you very much, Stephen.
And Josie, one thing I was thinking about is this might be something that would be good, that people can kind of continue to brainstorm as we're presenting, and they might have ideas, and that might be something we can come back and peek at if people are still thinking about it.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll just go ahead and continue, and then we'll take a look back later on. And we are going to come back to the Jamboard and do a few other activities on there as well. Does anyone have trouble editing or making any additions to the Jamboard? I see quite a few people are in there, but we're not seeing a lot of additions. Oh, I see. So they're on this page. So if you go to you see up at the top of your Jamboard, there's an arrow to the right. And this is fine. I like this. We can continue on this frame, but for the next one, we'll go to a different frame so that we can have a little bit of variation. But so this is great. I was wondering why is everyone so quiet? But now I see all of these ideas. So fail quick. Yes, I know Jess will particularly like that. Fail quick, succeed quicker, adapting quickly. I have no idea. I thought this was part of OER. And connection, movement. Oh, fantastic.
Those are great.
Flexible. All right. So I'm going to go back to our presentation. And Jess will provide a definition of Agile in terms of project management.
All right. So today we are focusing on Agile and the Agile mindset. This definition is not all-inclusive or absolute because Agile itself rejects restrictive definitions. And the goal of the Agile framework is to allow for that flexibility and application in a changing environment. This framework, originally appearing around 2001, was used in project management for software development companies. And the Agile Alliance defines Agile as the ability to create and respond to change. It is a way of dealing with and ultimately succeeding in, as we saw on our Jamboard, succeeding in an uncertain and turbulent environment. The authors of the Agile Manifesto, which identifies the Agile principles and values, chose Agile as the label for the whole idea because the word represented the adaptiveness and response to change, which was so important to their approach. Today, however, we really want to look at the Agile principles and values and explore how the Agile mindset can be applied to OER, benefiting student success in the classroom. So first, let's consider what is Agile and the Agile mindset. One of the core values to Agile, one of the core values is to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This focus on people and relationships lends to collaboration and teamwork over contracts and strict roles and responsibilities. Teams in Agile are self-organizing and giving team members decision-making power, the ability to take ownership and communicate regularly with other team members and share ideas that deliver quality products. Additionally, Agile spotlight on transparency fosters an environment of trust among the team members as well as the other stakeholders. And this trust and transparency is seen through regular feedback loops, which we'll talk about in a little bit, between stakeholders and developers and among team members. Practices such as the 15-minute daily scrum or the sprint review or the sprint retrospective are all reiterate these values. And finally, the ability to respond to change and continuously learn and improve is imbued in every element of the Agile framework and mindset. And as seen in the flexibility of roles and responsibilities of the development team, and the sprint retrospective, when the team identifies, for example, what worked well, and what could be improved. So thinking about that, we're going to go to the next screen, and it may still seem like Agile is a little vague. However, I do want to emphasize that Agile rejects those strict definitions, and as a framework and as a mindset focuses on the idea of fluidity and the ability to adapt and continuously improve in an uncertain environment. So the lack of an absolute definition allows for more flexibility for its use in diverse environments. So let's consider how this mindset really relates to OER.
So as Jeff noted, components of an Agile mindset include team-focused, decentered, iterative, collaborative, an embrace of continuous learning, intrinsic motivation, empowerment, diverse perspectives, continuous growth, uncertainties, feedback, fluidity, and openness to change. And on the OER side, please note that these lists of qualities are by no means all-encompassing. These are just a few that we've picked out. And I'm sensing that quite a few, not the majority of you or all of you here, have a pretty good understanding of OER, considering you're at an OER conference. And some attributes of OER we wanted to highlight include open, shared, collaborative, and decentered. So already you're seeing an overlap here, and that these two concepts are pretty congruous. But you're also probably thinking, well, that's interesting. They are related. Lots of things are related, but I'm not quite sure how that's meaningful and how is that useful. So from our work as instructional designers, Jess and I work as Agile project managers with diverse teams, which allows a shift from a focus on the errors someone made to the continual growth and improvement. So therefore, like, for example, instead of blaming or viewing the team as being held back, adapting to the unknown, the focus is instead shifted to continuous improvement, similar to and overlapping with the OER approach, given the co-creative, collaborative, decentered nature. Also, this way, every member of the team can move between positions, adapting to the unknown together. Failure is viewed as an opportunity to develop and improve as a team. Every member of that team is equally valued. In this, we see an embrace of equity and diverse perspectives where no one authority dictates the approach. And this embrace aligns with open pedagogy and a contrast to the traditional classroom. Zooming out to larger societal and cultural systems, we can see that systems of capitalist, imperialist hegemony feed off and exist because of senses of failure and feelings of want and lack, and exacerbate oppressiveness and inequality, which is a direct contrast to Agile. Finally, in this pandemic and for years prior, we've become acutely aware of the need to be flexible and adaptive. Agile is structured around a continual process of adapting to change in recognition that change can occur at any moment. So our argument is that Agile and OER are co-creators in the nurturing of knowledge. With the Agile mindset, we can better foster and facilitate the OER experience, practice, and process while promoting equity and inclusion. So by this point, you're thinking, okay, I'm sort of understanding. And so to illustrate and give shape to what our argument, we wanted to go through some applications and examples. We have about 4 applications and examples, and we also want to get your ideas as well. We may not have time to go through all of them, but we'll see how many we get through and at least cover briefly all of the applications we have. So the first one we chose to highlight was the feedback loops and collaboration piece. And so some obvious examples in writing classes include peer review in writing classes and continuous and ongoing feedback loops in discussions and routine check-ins, surveys, and polls. And so feedback used as an ID can ensure progress in fulfilling the team goals, including the client subject matter experts' goals, which shift and evolve. So in the classroom setting, then, feedback loops are used not simply as a way to develop competence, but to improve the instruction and structure of the class. So for example, an example from that represents an open pedagogy nature would be that the students co-create pieces of the syllabus together. Students work to create assignments. Students work to create quiz banks. And those assignments and those assessments and content gets reused in future iterations of the course, an online artifact that's collaboratively structured. So from here, we'll move into instructor to learner feedback.
All right, so how Agile feedback loops, I'm actually gonna first kind of apply it to instructional design and then in the classroom. I hope that's okay. So how Agile feedback loops in development, so as an instructional designer, for example, work is those iterative check-ins with the faculty SME and the department head, as well as web developers, to touch base and get feedback on course development as often as needed. Waiting until the end when you're done with the development is too late from an efficiency and effectiveness standpoint. On the other end of this idea of the feedback loops, as a faculty member teaching Spanish to college students online, one of the questions I often get is, how can you teach a foreign language online? And my answer is continuous feedback loops. Feedback loops are an iterative process of fostering student growth by helping students identify where they're excelling and where they can improve. As you can imagine, learning how to hablar español online can be a challenge, especially pronunciation and just getting that practice speaking the language. So my most successful feedback loops are related to this exact challenge. My students often record video discussions in Spanish, and to support their development in the grading process, I leave them personalized video responses, helping them with pronunciation or other areas that they might be struggling with. I know that we all have feedback loops in our classroom, and maybe we don't call them feedback loops, but we all probably have feedback loops in our classroom, and I would love to hear about some other examples of feedback loops.
So if you go back to our Jamboard, oh, nice. I like the image there. So if you go up this time, let's go to a new frame. And so you can do that by going to the top where you see those two rectangles, one on top of the other, and it should say 1/8. So the right arrow, the right facing arrow, will take you to the right. So let's go to frame 3, and this should be black. So you'll see one that has a black background and white text. And so we'd love for you to, in any way you'd like, write or add image, something to illustrate your use of feedback loops and collaboration, or an innovative way, or an idea you have, and just share freely. And then we'll take a look. We'll give it about maybe a minute or two, and then we'll continue. But of course, you're encouraged to continue adding to this as we move along with the presentation. I don't know what our breakdown of participants is here, but I'd love to know how many are faculty or instructional designers or work in another role, maybe students.
And I think this is really relevant too, Josie. I think no matter what role you work in, there's probably feedback loops. I mean, almost every job I've ever had has some sort of feedback loops.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting too is when at the end of every semester, when writing students are writing their reflections, they never fail to note how the aspect of the class they appreciated the most was working directly with group members or class members and getting feedback from class members, and they considered it invaluable. And I believe that they put more weight into the feedback from peers, from others, than from the instructor, or just a different kind of weight, because their peers are the active readers of their work, and they have this bond and a trust with each other. So I think, it applies to all areas of life in our feedback loops, and when we ask for feedback from coworkers or others in our circles. So we're seeing some good ideas posted here. We see student practicing. Yeah, student practicing in groups for presentations or interviewing each other is always a neat activity. Feedback post, conference from planning committee, transcript review. So some of these are pretty clear, but some of these really value to have a little bit more. Would anyone who's contributed or are in the process of contributing like to chime in and unmute and maybe elaborate on what you posted here? I'm very curious about the audio podcast essentials article. If you're comfortable, whoever posted that, would you be willing to unmute and give us a sense of the intention behind that?
Yes, this is Deidre. What I do in my Canvas course, I have people respond to one another using the audio tool. And it's like a podcast. We keep it going, the information based on what we're doing for that week.
Oh, wow. And so this article discusses exactly your class, or?
No, it's just an example that he did. And so I'm replicating some of those tools inside of my Canvas.
So your students are actually doing podcasts.
Yes.
Oh, I love that. And what do you teach, Deidre?
I teach sociology.
Oh, wow.
That's really cool. I've heard a lot about podcasts recently.
And does it work well?
It does, but I must tell you, it keeps you going because one person will respond. It's just a time thing, but it does work if you have one topic, one session.
That's great. Jess, were you going to say?
No, that's really interesting, but I was going to just comment on a few of the other ones. I mean, all of these are really great. I love the circle of knowledge shared among facilitator and students. I think sometimes the first time you do something like that, students are a little nervous, but then kind of going on the agile mindset, you're really building on that trust and transparency. And I think the circle of knowledge is really, I think that's really representative of some of the things we're going to be talking about. So, but I think all of them are really great.
I like how active many of these are. You know, actively doing is so essential to learning, practicing, getting up around a classroom and the whiteboard, you know, getting tactilely involved, transcript review by colleagues to identify areas of improvement. Yes. And as you see here, you might have caught this, but the way we're holding this session is to model an agile team process. So we're all learning as well as we continue through this presentation. So let's go back to our presentation. And here we are at the fail slide. I think the one that Jess and I both appreciate, and Jess will go ahead.
All right. So fail fast and fail often is one of Agile's philosophies. And many might ask, why would I want to fail fast and often, right? I know my college students would definitely concur that this is not a great idea. The Agile mindset suggests that you're not failing, but the goal is to be iterative and to continuously learn and grow. We must be open to failure. So learning from our mistakes, evaluating what went well and where to improve. And therefore, if you fail fast and often, the more you're learning, improving, and growing. So that's the concept. To place this in context, in foreign language classrooms, the biggest challenge students struggle with is oral proficiency, not just pronunciation, but rather they avoid trying to speak the language out loud for fear that what they say might not be perfect. In other words, they avoid practicing the language because of their fear of failure. And this is very, very common in foreign language classrooms. And so research on foreign language learning identifies that about 10% of foreign language learners really excel at oral proficiency. And it is not because of natural talents, but rather students' willingness to be incorrect, their willingness to what in many people's eyes is fail. I've seen this fear over and over again. And the students who are willing to fail and to communicate out loud in Spanish, for example, see exponential growth in their oral proficiency skills from when they first enter the classroom to the end of the semester. And as an avid foreign language learner myself, I can't tell you the number of times I have experienced what we as adults identify as failure. What I realized, though, a long time ago and continue to share in my classrooms is that we need to reorient our perspective on failure, that maybe failure is not the right word, because progress is still had each time my students practice speaking the language. And I see this continuous improvement throughout the semester as my students, even though sometimes they feel very uncomfortable and nervous and they're about failing, right? To practice speaking the language results in a growth in their abilities. Since we're on the topic of reorienting our perspective, let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So this concept of failing fast and often characterizes Agile's growth mindset. It also overlaps with the theory of a growth versus a fixed mindset by Carol Dweck. And that has become popular within educational circles over the last decade. In Carol Dweck's TED Talk, The Power of Yet, from 2014, she explores how children face challenge and difficulty, and she defines a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, and how a growth mindset fosters agile and highly adaptable individuals. So let's take a moment and listen to what she has to say.
The power of yet. I heard about a high school in Chicago where students had to pass a certain number of courses to graduate, and if they didn't pass a course, they got the grade not yet. And I thought that was fantastic, because if you get a failing grade, you think, I'm nothing, I'm nowhere. But if you get the grade not yet, you understand that you're on a learning curve. It gives you a path into the future. Not yet also gave me insight into a critical event early in my career, a real turning point. I wanted to see how children coped with challenge and difficulty. So I gave 10-year-olds problems that were slightly too hard for them. Some of them reacted in a shockingly positive way. They said things like, I love a challenge, or, I was hoping this would be informative. They understood that their abilities could be developed. They had what I call a growth mindset. But other students felt it was tragic, catastrophic. From their more fixed mindset perspective, their intelligence had been up for judgment, and they failed. Instead of luxuriating in the power of yet, they were gripped in the tyranny of now.
Okay, so Dweck's definition of a fixed and growth mindset from her 2012 interview, she identifies that in a growth mindset, as we can see on the left green image, with a growth mindset, students understand that their talents and abilities can be developed through effort, good teaching, and persistence. And they don't necessarily think everyone's the same or anyone can be Einstein, but they believe everyone can get smarter if they work at it. With a fixed mindset, students believe their basic abilities, their intelligence, their talents, they're just fixed traits. And they have a certain amount, and that's that. And their goal becomes to look smart and never look dumb. So the question is, how do we foster an agile, continuous improvement, growth mindset in the classroom?
So some examples of how to foster a growth mindset in the classroom and in teams is to praise wisely, which means praise the process, effort, strategy, and improvement. So in other words, instead of saying, you are so naturally talented, or you are such a good writer, it's much more effective in terms of continuous improvement and growth to phrase it more as, you worked really hard on this essay and it paid off, or I saw you go through the different stages of the process by brainstorming ideas, creating an outline, getting peer feedback, and it really shows in the quality of your work here. So the same applies in teams, working among teams, peers, and a facilitator leading that process, praising that process, and shifting the focus away from some kind of a product, placing the value in the process. Another piece of this is identifying strengths for improvement. It's so important not to neglect this often neglected approach, or otherwise the message will always be critical, every suggestion seen as a fail. And it's surprising, interesting, how often faculty do not take the time to think about this. And I see this as in my department head role as a supervisor and an evaluator. When I review faculty courses, I see a lot of the feedback, it's substantive feedback, but it's all, you didn't do this, and this could be improved, and be sure to, you know, do X, Y, and Z. And there's no praise, there's no recognition of strengths. And if you think of the student's perspective, you can think, wow, how would it be to feel, how would it feel to see these comments and just think, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. It feels like I failed, I failed, I failed, I failed, I failed. And that can be extremely discouraging. As we all know, you know, in our lives, we all benefit from being appreciated and knowing our strengths so that we know what we can build off of to improve. And when I point this out to faculty, they just didn't think about it. It just didn't enter their heads to think, oh, you know what? That totally makes sense. And students will be more receptive to suggestions when I recognize what they have done well. And there is always something to praise. And the same situation applies in teams. There's always something to praise. And by doing so, we make everyone involved feel more invested, more motivated, more encouraged, and strengthen the bond and the efficiency of the team. About a week ago, we at Pima Community College had a Pima Online professional retreat day, and we were visited by some members from D2L, including one of the CEOs and co-creators of D2L. And we had the opportunity to ask them questions in a fireside chat, online fireside chat with no fire, fortunately. And we asked, what are some ways that D2L is working? D2L is the learning management system we use. We recognize it's not for all of you Canvas or other Moodles out there. And so we asked, what is D2L doing to facilitate a little bit more flexibility in content delivery and in classrooms? And they introduced something called the Mastery View Gradebook, which we were excited about. And this is what it looks like. We haven't been able to enable it in our system yet, but you'll see that the shift is to focus away from points to almost, not yet, satisfactory, outstanding, which are much more encouraging and holistic to focus on, instead of, why did I miss one point? Why did I miss this point? And much more amenable to being encouraging and motivating for students. And, I think of myself as perpetually not yet. So, and that's more helpful to think I've scored 70 out of 200 points in life or something along those lines. So maybe you all have in your platforms, you have this mastery view or some version of it already available to you. And if so, we'd love to hear. So please let us know in the chat. And so backtracking for just a moment, another piece of this for this growth mindset, as opposed to a fixed mindset, is to encourage students to engage in challenging assignments, to engage in that state of discomfort. So from here, you'll see the blue frame. Go back to the Jamboard and you'll see a blue frame, and it's called Growth Mindset, Fail Fast and Fail Often. And so we're very interested in hearing some of your ideas about ways to foster this, things you already do, things you might be inspired to do, things you've always wanted to try to do, or maybe even a problem that you were trying to work out related to how can you encourage more of a growth mindset in classes you develop or oversee or teach. Jessica, would you like to add any thoughts about this as well?
Yes, I think also you could even add, like I, excuse me, I know that during this last year, a lot of us have taken on projects. And sometimes that process of taking on a project where you know very little about what you're doing, but you're willing to fail is actually very satisfactory at the end. And I will say that I relate this to some of the, I've been working on learning to code and I just love it, but I feel like I'm constantly failing. But then when I finally figure it out, it brings so much satisfaction to know that I was able to figure it out. So I think projects are just a great example for our students and even if we're not students, for that kind of mindset and how we're failing, but then we're succeeding, right?
So love to see all of your ideas on this blue background frame. And again, it's number 4, so be sure to take a look at the top of your Jamboard and click to the right until you're at 4/8. And you begin including your ideas. Along with that idea of failing fast and failing often, I'm also working with Jess. We've been taking some courses together to learn code, and for, I don't know, a month or two, we were stuck in the JavaScript course on week 2. Week 2 just had the most difficult JavaScript assignment to pass. And so that, it made us realize all sorts of things about how learning doesn't necessarily happen in these time blocks. It's not linear. It requires, some weeks are going to take months possibly, but it also helped us to see the value of failing and failing again and failing again, and finally getting to week 3 and passing the JavaScript course.
I feel like I was on a not yet path for quite a while. And I feel like learning a musical instrument, I'm on a not yet path for a very long time. But I still enjoy it. I'm still learning slowly.
So this is a really interesting one, thinking about avoiding the word fail. Often clear effort towards. So I get that, the more we say the word fail, but what would you say an agile approach to that word? Because the fail is used so much that it's to take the connotative negativity out of it and to sort of recontextualize, reframe, and redefine it as something stripped of its negative aspects and meanings and looked at as more of just process. Or part of success requires failure, right? So that's an interesting one. The word fail does invoke a fight or flight reaction, right? You hear fail and automatically your limbic system, your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. So,
and I have a thought on this, and I'd love to hear anybody else's thought as well. But in foreign languages, and they say kids learn foreign languages the fastest because their brain is just exploding, but with growing, right? But one of the elements about kids learning languages the fastest is they don't know about failure and how frowned upon it is. And so it's it's ingrained in society that failure is bad, And so my kids say all sorts of funny things in other languages, and we just laugh. And of course, I'd never call it a failure, but as we get older and we see this in our students, our high school students, our college students, they're so afraid to fail because of the social criticism of it, right? If it wasn't so criticized, it wouldn't. So I think it's kind of on our shoulders to kind of create that trusting environment that no one's getting criticized. We're here, like, that's why I think team environments are really good, because we're really here, the students are really there to support each other, and they can mutually grow together, and we can grow as a class if we can create that trusting environment. It's challenging though, I will say.
I love that. And another way this could be used is this whole activity could be done in a class, brainstorming ideas with students as a community and co-creators of that community. What works for you in terms of a growth mindset? Fail fast and fail often. What do you think about when you hear the word fail? And could we as a class or a team redefine our notions of failure? So that would be I'm seeing a slowdown in the amount of posts here, but these are great. I love sticky notes and all of these I'm learning so much from all of you. Yes, repeat the type of assignment, not the same assignment, but something with the same concepts, but different application. And perhaps those on the team or those in the class can create that iterative version as a team. How do we convince students of the benefits of failing? I find our students I know, and it's tough, isn't it? Because it's so ingrained throughout K-12. And I think we just have to just start from zero and discuss it with them instead of telling them, right? And having them define it in terms of a community. But it is tough. Our culture and our society, capitalism thrives off of failure because it's that feeling of lack and want that drives spending. So, I don't have a nice enough car, and I need this, and I need the right shoes. So I don't know. I'm interested in your ideas. I think we just have to break it down and reclaim it. Jess?
Oh yeah, the only thing I wanted to say, but this is my story for all of my weekly videos for my students, is I think one element of that, students really see professors and faculty as, kind of in this hierarchical pyramid, and I think it's as perfect, right? And so I also think it's our job to share with our students that, not necessarily private things, but share with our students that we're not perfect. And I think they really appreciate that we're human, and so that perfection really isn't there. And so I feel like that allows kind of a door to be opened for students to kind of feel more comfortable in knowing that the professor isn't perfect either. And so sometimes I talk about my failures and laugh, and my students will be falling out of their chairs because I've made some pretty terrible mistakes in different languages. And but then I'm like, it's okay to not do it right. We have to practice before we can figure out what's right or what works, right? Anyways, that was the only thing I was thinking about.
And two, like shifting the gradebook focus to not yet and almost, that helps a lot. And the little things we can do like that to create one little shift in the pattern makes an impact ultimately on the whole system. So, and it really does change the focus and the mindset of the class, and avoiding that F, 59 points and below is an F. It's more, of encouragement. So I love this. I love all of these. This attitude is important for the development of OER materials. I think faculty sometimes are not willing to try to develop OER materials because they are worried about failing. Yes, that's so true. This approach gives them permission to try, make mistakes, and improve. Yeah, it's not just in the classroom, it's in the instructional design end, it's the facilitator end, it's the faculty's end, it's course development. Yeah, we have to feel more comfortable with it in order to innovate often. So moving back to our slides. Oh, skipping ahead a little bit. So we have flexibility, our third one, and I know we're not going to get to 4, but that's kind of what we planned. So flexibility in roles and responsibilities. So this element of Agile applies to OER in the humanistic approach and the hudagogy approach. And here on the right of the slide, you'll see a diagram of hudagogy. And right at the very top, you'll see self-determined and learning. And so you'll see also some other aspects, avoidance of teacher-centered learning. So all of, it's clear here the overlaps between hudagogy and open pedagogy. Move into the world of the learner. And let's see, knowledge-based future, where knowing how to learn is a fundamental skill. And so I won't read all of these, but you can feel free to go ahead and read them. And so a piece of this that applies when we design courses and also teach them is students become the teachers, as we've talked about, and the creators of their own learning. And so how to integrate that from the instructional design perspective is challenging, because we're restricted within the rigidity or the setup or the predetermined elements of the learning management system. So it's a matter of how do we work with these pieces, these factors that aren't going to change, and find some flexibility where students can also create the content and help deliver it. And one way that I'm working with this with a subject matter expert for a Lit 261 course at Pima Community College, which is Introduction to Modernism, is that we are building it in such a way that students are co-creating the content as we develop it. So for example, taking photos that we can use for the module images, the module headers. And so the current students won't benefit from being in an environment in which their current work is being showcased, but in the future students will then see, oh, this course has pieces of it created by those who came before me in the course, and we're all creating the space and it's constantly evolving. And another way is that their classwork, their projects, like a video lecture, will be used for subsequent iterations of the course as lectures. So it's not all instructor lecture, instructor lecture, instructor lecture, instructor lecture, but it's actually peers, students learning from each other. And so Jess, you have some thoughts about this as well.
Yes. So I was thinking more about kind of the traditional organizational paradigm and an agile organizational paradigm and its relationship with how this applies to classrooms. So while the traditional organization paradigm is built on the idea of hierarchy, the agile focus is not only on the agility of the individual. So we're working with students trying to support their adaptability, right, with that growth mindset, but we're also fostering, but Agile also fosters an agile organization, and in this sense, also an agile classroom. So, for example, in Agile, teams are self-organizing, and this allows the development team, for example, to self-determine responsibilities, and as well as take advantage of that flexibility in a team environment. There's no status or hierarchy, and all team members are peers. This is also called a flat organization. And instead of a hierarchical pyramid that many organizations still use, the Agile is flat, right? And so how can we see this in the classroom? My first response is through group work. And I realize that can be more challenging online. In person, it's a lot easier. In Spanish, for example, students often work in groups for peer-to-peer practice and feedback. And we still do that online, and as well as for a review before a final oral or a written exam, students will form groups and present on different topics that might appear in the exam. And the idea is that the students are self-organizing and they can choose and change what kind of roles they play, right? And responsibilities that they take on in that group. Excuse me. And so we present, students form groups and they present on different topics, for example, that might be present in an exam, and they teach the other students as a form of review. And all the people in the class are peers. So similar to that knowledge circle, I think that someone had mentioned earlier, that we're all peers and are all involved in the self-organizing groups and presentations. So that's really my idea on flexibility, flexibility of roles and responsibility. I didn't know if we wanted to talk about that more on the Jamboard, or we're going to talk about trust and transparency.
I think given the time, we want to leave a lot of time for you to work in groups and kind of play around with some ideas. So for that one and this one, we'll kind of go through them quickly and then move into a group session, and then give you about maybe 15 to 15 minutes or so to develop ideas with your groups. And so this final piece and we've only selected, 4 components, but really they're endless. And so the trust and transparency element of Agile is, like, for example, from the facilitator end, the project manager establishes consistency and routine. So any sorts of actions that demonstrate that consistency, like checking in on a weekly or bi-weekly at least basis, and developing those routine connections, meetings with team members, and also in a similar way in the classroom. Those routines, students develop more trust when they trust, oh, my instructor is going to send a welcome to a new week email or announcement every Monday around the afternoon. And if I don't get one, I'm going to be worried, and I'll probably check to see if it's in my junk mail folder. And so anything like that we can do is valued. And similarly, from an instructional design perspective, we know that students appreciate consistency module to module. Instead of going from one discussion to 5 discussions and a quiz and this and that in another module, the more you can make it consistent week to week, is valued, so that students can know what to expect and not stress about what's happening in the weeks ahead. This other one is so fundamental. Trust that students are there to learn. So as a team member and facilitator, one of the epiphanies I had about 20 years ago or so, when I was teaching my very first year of freshman composition at Arizona State University, I suddenly realized how I had this mind shift where I just decided I'm going to trust, I'm just going to trust that every student in my class is there to learn and nothing else. And maybe they'll break that trust further along in the semester, but this is the way I'm starting out. And that helped tremendously because they felt that trust. When we engaged in conversation or an email, the way I responded or communicated with them was with the understanding that I fully trust that you are here because you want to learn this material. And it's the same sort of situation. If we show that and demonstrate that feeling intrinsically that we feel, and it's genuine, it really shines through in everything. And team members feel it as well. And following through on promises, of course, also is a huge component of establishing trust and transparency. And I know Jess has some other applications and examples as well. And then we'll move into breakouts.
Okay, well, Josie, you know how much I love Tilt. Did you
Yeah. We haven't mentioned Tilt yet, no.
Okay, well, I love Tilt. And why do I love Tilt? Because I love transparency. I am uber transparent. In my project style, sharing with faculty and department heads, I share everything, the whole project. They have access to everything that I'm doing so they can see, and I check in with them. But on the side of with students as well, one of the really important things to me, which, you know, I've been teaching Spanish at the college level for about 17 years. And one of the things that sometimes we forget is creating that transparency for students in the actual assignment. We think that it's pretty clear, you just have to do this one thing, but actually we're not offering, sometimes we don't offer them those rubrics. Say, here's a rubric, or here are the exact, you know, you have your purpose. What is the purpose? Students really appreciate understanding the purpose of why they're learning something. And then you have the task. What are these things that you have to complete? And then what is the criteria? How am I grading you? What am I expecting from you? And if we can offer some of those clear examples, I feel like students are really much more, they achieve much more, and then they feel more satisfied with the product that they've produced. And part of that is making, if you have a rubric, making the rubric visible, or making those expectations easily accessible somewhere where the students can see what those expectations of those assignments are. One other thing that I haven't got to experience yet, but I would like to, in my in-person classes, I've done it, but not with my online classes yet, is kind of co-establishing with students different goals and structures and kind of standards of the community, right? Excuse me. So looking at how, for example, we do discussions, and while we all have in our syllabus a netiquette statement, I think it's nice to include the students and what are some of the important things when you write a discussion in terms of what students are hoping for in terms of what we call netiquette, right? What are their expectations of their peers? And I think by allowing students to share that and implementing that into maybe at the top of your discussions, please follow these, you know, these rules. I think that allows students to feel like, oh, my voice is being listened to, and what's important to me is also important in this class. So I think that kind of that co-creation, and then also you can create with your students on an individual basis, which I've done this in my in-person classes, is individual goals. So sitting with a student and say, okay, well, what's your goal in this class? And so they really appreciate that you care what their goals are, because sometimes we don't get to see those, right? So yeah, it becomes more relevant to them if you want to know what their goals are outside of class and maybe how this class might fit into that.
All right, so time for breakout rooms, and we'll have about 10 minutes because we want to have a little time to share, and then we also have an exit poll that we'd love for you to participate in. So if you go back to your Jam boards, you'll see that these ones are blank because we just didn't have enough time, but you're welcome to add anyway. But for now, go to 7 and 8, and we'll have one group. Let's say group 1 will be, and I'll put a post-it note here. I'll say group 1 will be number 7. And then number 8 will be group 2. And in your groups, we ask that you define some other aspect of Agile. So anything we talked about, or maybe some completely other idea that sparked for you. So just kind of discuss this. It's pretty open. You might even determine how you want to focus on this in your groups. And so before we do breakout, I'm just going to go back to our Kanban board and place this to-do item in our in progress column. And then we can define Agile in our done column. So we can go ahead and Stephen or Debbie, are you able to break?
Yep, I've got 2 sessions set up, and I've just automatically assigned people across the 2 sessions. Okay, so
Okay.
all right. This is gonna pull Josie and Jessica. It's gonna pull both of you into a breakout room, but then you can just jump out if you need to. Okay.
Perfect.
So
Thank you.
I am gonna start the breakout sessions now. Participants, you'll see in the participant list, that's where you'll see your breakout room show up. And so it's got a big join button. Just click join to jump right in.
And did we say how long the breakout was? I might have missed that.
That I don't remember hearing that. Make up a time. Tell me how long you want it.
I'm thinking, how long do we want the breakout to be, Josie? Oh, you're on mute. The statement for 2020.
I think
Yeah.
I think about 9 minutes because we
9
have to
minutes.
share ideas and then do an exit poll.
Okay, I'll send a kind of a notice to them at the 8-minute mark, and then we'll close it because it takes a minute to jump back in. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Stephen, would you make me the host again, please? Oh, you have the perfect. Thank you. Stephen, you can jump into a breakout room.
You're right, I can.
Yeah, you can join either one. You should be able to join either one. Or you could choose not to. That's up to you.
I can also choose not to.
I just was letting you know that you have the, that you're able to do that. Hi, Jolie. We're in breakout. Oh, she's gone. Josie, you've got about 4 minutes left for the breakouts.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. I'm going to send them a 4-minute, 3.5-minute warning.
welcome back, everyone. And I know Jess and I dropped into your groups a little bit to see how things were going and heard some really great ideas. And so let's start with group one. If someone from group one would be comfortable unmuting and giving us a sense of your thinking here, if you all collaborated together on these ideas or started just brainstorming independently, that would be great.
This is Andrea. Our group mostly brainstormed just independently. I thought some of the really great things is the idea of using memes and videos, which I think a lot of instructors have started to kind of embrace. And I think students like that. And maybe if we use meme and videos, which I think they're accustomed to because of social media and YouTubing, maybe they'd be a little bit more willing to come onto our side when we ask them to do stuff that they're not as accustomed to. Let's see here. Yeah, and I think there was just another comment about how this seems like a great way to interweave this with OER, and I do agree with this comment that someone wrote in our group that OER really takes some time to develop, and maybe this could be a nice entry point for OER.
Yeah, and I love this idea of students recording messages that can be played for the next semester to give students advice. That's beautiful. I love that. And this memes one, I'm so curious because I know students love memes and we all love memes. And if people have like meme places they go to find memes, I would love to know. So if you have suggestions for finding memes for your classes, and I'm curious for those who use memes, do you look for memes that are just to provide a smile, or do you look for them to generate some kind of a discussion or assignment, or do you look for some that apply specifically to some kind of a concept that you're working with in the class? Again, if anyone can share, I'd just love to hear.
I think students like something new or different, but if you explain it first and show them how to do it, they're much more comfortable. So the learning process takes place. If you think about agility, it's not only the students, but the faculty as well.
Yeah,
because we have to be more open to different ways of presenting material, because the students, they've moved past us.
That's right. And that's very universal design, UDL, right? Universal, multiple methods of presentation and representation. And yeah, exactly. I mean, and hi, Marcia. It's good to see you here. Marcia's our colleague at Pima Community College.
Good to see you too.
All right. So let's, anyone else from group one want to chime in? Okay, so Jess, I believe you were in group two, so would you like to start us off here, or should we open it up?
Sure, or anybody can. I had a diverse group, so that was pretty cool to kind of see how Agile can be applied in different environments, right, in higher ed. I don't know if everybody wants to read their post or
Sure, Jessica, I'll read mine. This is Karen in the library. I was the green sticky note who wrote that we can apply the Agile mindset in other contexts too. So I'm in the library and we do a lot of one-shot teaching and work with students at the reference desk and in other different types of context. But I was thinking too, like, boy, this is so resonating with me as I think about how I interact with my colleagues, you know, in the committees and the teams that I'm on and the types of projects that we're on. I mean, I was really thinking about all these different values and traits and thinking of new ways to interact with my colleagues. So I'm just enjoying everything I'm hearing. So thank you.
all right. And I don't,
This is Rich. I'll go ahead and address. I put two up here, the pink one and the blue one. And I'm known at our college as the troublemaker. I come to education after about 27 years in industry, and I was a late entry into the education arena. And so I come with some different ideas and some experiences. So I challenge everything. But one of the things I think we could do in the way of Agile is being more flexible in our grading, designing rubrics to allow some credit for trying, doing something, even if it's not the answer that we expect or that we need. So not a 0, not a 70, but maybe a 40% on the assignment, just for making a good effort and doing something that's reasonable, that shows some engagement with the concept. The other thing that I said was to take a risk as faculty, to make an assignment not so easy that's to grade, but that is interesting and relevant for the students, so that they're wanting to engage in it in a meaningful way, not cheat, not reuse someone else's work, but own it for themselves. I think that's what education is all about.
Thank you so much, Rich, for making that point of both points. And the point about grading is it's like all of these, but the point about, if you're not familiar with I think most people probably here are the ungrading movement, looking at alternative methods of grading, like contract grading or specifications grading, or all those different forms of grading can, because our traditional grading system is rooted in those much older methods that we know are ineffective and reproduce inequalities and methods of oppression. So yes, absolutely. Love these ideas. Love this idea too that I think it was Linda brought up, that we can apply the Agile. We can apply it to everything, trust, transparency. It's hard to argue that any of these concepts are anything other than valuable in most contexts.
and Josie, one thing I was going to mention, everything I've read about Agile, there is a lot of commentary that, it is a challenge to not trust people in a general basis, but I think trust, kind of creating that trusting relationship with your team. Like, I know you're going to do this and I'm going to do this, kind of building up that trust. So I will say that it takes a while to, like even in our project, right? In our projects and for students with their instructors. And then the other thing I was going to mention, I think once students realize that they have this amazing ability to create, and this is relating to Rich's comment, when they actually have this amazing ability to create, this idea of cheating is like, they are not interested in that. They are so taken by the idea that they have the opportunity to create, and it's something they're interested in. So they become inspired, and I love seeing inspired students. But it's getting students to that point that they believe in themselves. They have that confidence that they are allowed to create, and if they fail, maybe they're getting a not yet, but they can continue to improve. And I don't know, those are some of the things I love to see in my students that really inspire me as an instructor and an instructional designer. How can I create things that are not so rigid and strict, but engaging and inspiring for the students? And maybe they have to use it on their phone, but what can we do to create those access points and confidence points and support our students?
Thank you, Jess. Exactly. And so we're about the end of our time. And so I'm going to move our final Post-it note for the to-do list over to the done list, even though our hope is that you'll continue thinking about these ideas and how to apply them. And so we would love for you, before you leave, to just do this one last question from the Menti poll, which is, what from this session are you most interested in applying to your OER instruction and course design? If you wouldn't mind just taking a few moments to fill that out and take a look at all of our responses, we would so appreciate it. And thank you very much, Stephen, for posting the link to Menti and the code into the chat. These are fantastic, and we know we're 2 minutes past time, and we know you have other things to do, other meetings to attend, and so we want to just say thank you so much for being here with us today, and we hope that this 90 minutes has allowed you to understand how, with the Agile mindset, we can better foster and facilitate the OER experience, practice and process while promoting equity and inclusion.
Yes, I want